So, hi, for those of you who have not met me before, I generally do a nice little introduction about myself. My name is Kat. I run the motorhome and van life website, Wandering Bird. In 2018, I quit my job to go touring in a motorhome around the UK and Europe, and I've done that pretty much ever since. But you guys aren't here to talk about me, you don't really care. You're here to talk about my dog, Mac. So this is Mac. He is now 6.5 years old. We bought him as a Cocker Spaniel. We thought he was a working Welsh Cocker Spaniel. Turns out he's not. He's some sort of mongrel. He doesn't look like this lovely Spaniel down here. He's like a big, stocky thing. But he is still lovely, and he is my van dog. And he has been on many, many adventures with me. And next week we're going all the way up to the top of Norway and back. He is a very, very well-travelled little puppy. So have all of you in here got dogs, or some of you thinking of getting dogs? Yeah, some of you are thinking, and some of you just hiding from the rain. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Not a problem at all. So we actually first picked Mac up when he was about 9 weeks old, and actually picked him up in the motorhome. We nipped back last time we went to Nord. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. He's quite scary. He was about 9 weeks old. We were in Norway at the time and found him on the internet. I went, that's my dog. And the lady couldn't hold him longer than 5 days. So we spent 5 days, crazy drive, back from Norway, all the way back to Wales to pick him up when he was this tiny. Absolute tiny thing. So what I'm going to do here is just run through a few of the things that people generally ask me about touring with dogs. We're going to start with travelling to Europe and the stuff that you need to know about for that, and then some more tips and tricks for just having a dog in the van with you. I am going to throw a lot of information at you. If you want to get a copy of a checklist that I've put all this together on, there's a couple of QR codes down here that you can get it, and there's also some leaflets around so you can get the link for you. But let's dive in. So the first thing you need to know if you're going to take your dog from the UK to Europe is they've got to be microchipped. Top tip with this one, make sure you update your details if you move house or change your phone number or anything like that. But also make sure that if you co-own the dog with your spouse or a partner or whoever, that both of your details are on the microchip. Ran into this really weird situation a few years ago where my ex-husband was in the motorhome with Mac and I was following along in a car behind. And because Mac was in my name on the microchip, but he was with my husband, even though we had the same surname, in the van, they got really, really funny, the French did, when they scanned him at the port. Very, very odd. So just make sure both of your names are on there and you'll find it a lot easier. Anybody here have a dog with a rabies vaccination of several years ago before we left the EU and you had to do the teacher test? Does anybody here have to do that? Yeah. So poor little Mackie, we took him out of the UK when he was about 4 months old. And the process that used to happen is you'd go to the vet, you'd get a rabies jab, then about 3 weeks later you'd go back and they'd do this test to make sure that they were properly inoculated. And then if they weren't, they had to have another one. But of course he was a tiny puppy that was growing like wildfire, so every time he had a jab, he'd grown again and he kept failing the test. He had to have it like 3 times. Luckily, that has now all stopped. It's about the only good thing that has come out of dog travel and leaving the EU is that you don't have to do that anymore. The only thing that you need to do now is you need to get a rabies jab done at least 21 days before travel. I did this chat a while ago and someone was like, but I can't get in the vet 21 days. And they thought it had to be exactly 21 days before travel. It does not. It just has to be 21 days plus. So you can do it, months and months in advance. And the rabies jab will vary depending on what your vet uses. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. So whatever they use, that's how long it will last for. So like I say, my vet tends to use a 2-year one, so you could get it done a year before you go away. But as long as it's done at least a clear 21 days before travel. Now comes the fun part. So what the rules are now is when you are taking a dog, a British dog with a British registration, out of the UK, or the Great Britain, I should say, into the rest of Europe, you now have to have what's known as an animal health certificate. It's the equivalent, or what has replaced, the UK pet passport. Anybody here still have a UK pet passport for their dog? Don't get rid of it. It's still part of your pet's history. But unfortunately, you still have to have the animal health certificate. So what this means is it has to be issued within a 10-day window of when you are looking to travel out of Great Britain. So as soon as you've booked your ferry or your tunnel, whichever method you're using to get out of Great Britain, I highly recommend that you book up a vet appointment. Now, the fun thing with this is that the prices of these are insane. I know somebody who paid £350 for one of these things. What's even better, she says sarcastically, about this is that it's only valid for 4 months. I love that stat. Why 4 months? It means your pet can stay longer in the EU than you can, but never mind. So it's valid for 4 months, but it's only valid for one trip. So if you wanted to pop across for a week, pop back again, pop across again, pop back again, within that 4-month window, you would need a new animal health certificate every single trip. It's extortionate, it's ridiculous. Apparently they're working on another plan, but that other plan has not as yet materialised. So, couple of tips for you. There is a company called Abbywell, and I wish I got commission from recommending them because I really spray a lot of it. They charge £90 per dog, and I believe the second dog is 45 or something like that. And what they do, they're based down in Dover or somewhere near Dover, Folkestone maybe. And the Abbywell vet, you can do it all online. So if you're going via the tunnel or via Calais, as soon as you've booked your ferry in, you can book in with them. You can submit all your paperwork online. So the paperwork would be proof of your microchip, proof of the rabies vaccination and the date and all that stuff. And then you can just turn up with your dog when you get down to Dover, Calais. Do it the day before you travel, just in case there's a bit of wiggle room. And like I say, they charge £90 to do that. Takes about 10 minutes. That is the cheapest I know of. Not every vet will do it, but somewhere around 100, 150 is typical for a vet. If you're being charged much more than that, I highly recommend that you shop around. One thing to bear in mind is that you do need it in the language of the first country you're going to enter. So for the majority of us, that will be French. Some of you, if you're going to get the ferry down to Spain, you might need to get it in Spanish. That's something to chat to your vet about. And you still need one of these if you're popping across to Ireland and back. You don't need to worry about various other things, which we will get to shortly, but you do still need the animal health certificate. Now, tapeworm, oh, there we go, it's next. Actually, when I said get to shortly, we're going to get to it now. Tapeworm. Tapeworm treatments you generally give to your dog when you're coming back into the UK, I was going to say EU then, back into the UK, and we'll talk about that more a little later. But if you're going straight from Britain to Ireland, you need to have a tapeworm before you go. Don't worry about it if you're going to anywhere else, because I failed to see how you're going to get to Norway or Malta without going through other countries first. So, for example, I'm going up to Norway next week. I'll probably take a couple of weeks to get up there, but when I get up there, I've got to give Mac a tapeworm issued via vet. So I'll have to find a vet, get a tapeworm treatment issued for him, get his paperwork all signed and stamped before I cross into the Norwegian border. So the same thing applies if you're going to Ireland. You need to get a tapeworm treatment issued 1 to 5 days, so a clear 24 hours before you travel, and then up to 5 days before you cross onto the Irish border. So, tunnel or ferry? Lots of people ask me this. There are pros and cons to both. The tunnel is fantastic if you're travelling with a pet because it means that you're staying in the vehicle with them. It's really quick, really easy, often cheaper than a ferry. There's a massive big yellow building. You can't miss it. There's plenty of parking outside for vans. And you go in there with your dog, with their paperwork. They check it. They scan this little microchip thing. You get back in your vehicle and on you go. Easy as you like, really straightforward. And as you can see, little Mac there is quite happy. They just stay in the vehicle the whole time. Really not a problem at all. There's also a couple of walking little play areas where you can empty them before they go on the tunnel if you've got time. I will say the muzzle is not meant to be fitted like that. He is less than happy about having a muzzle here. Top tip for you. So when you go on a ferry, you've got two choices. You either leave your pet in the vehicle, in which case nothing really happens. They still scan it and check the paperwork, but then you don't need to worry about muzzles or anything else like that. However, several ferry lines do something called a pet-friendly cabin. Portsmouth to Con is the one that I often take. They've actually got a couple that go across to Ireland as well. But it means that you can take your dog out, or your cat, if you've got a little carrier with them, you can take them out of the vehicle into the pet-friendly cabin. They can't walk around the rest of the boat, but they can stay with you in the cabin. So I often do an overnight crossing if I'm going on the ferry, and it means Matt can stay and come on the cabin with me. Not every ship on that route does it, so you do need to be careful which one. And I think there's only 8 or 10 cabins, so they book up ridiculously fast. But if you can get one of those, it means that they have to wear a muzzle from your vehicle to the cabin. And then if you go out, they call it the poop deck, where they can go and have a little walk. It makes me laugh every time. But if you go out, you can see it there. It's got little little dog-friendly area for it. So if they go on there, they have to wear a muzzle there as well. When you pull up at the ferry terminal, you will be asked by the person, dog, and then they scan it, and then they ask you if you've got the muzzle, and you wave it at them all proudly that you've got a muzzle. Do not wave it at them proudly while it's brand new in its box, never been taken out before. Because what's going to happen next is you're going to be in the ferry, and you generally get there, you either get there first in a motorhome or you get there last, whichever way around they decide to do it. But generally, they've loaded all the cars on the top deck, so they moved all that up and then they've shoved all the motorhomes in underneath, and now they really want to go. So they're rushing you up to get you to leave your vehicle with your dog, and your dog's going, what the heck is going on? I don't want one of these on my face, Mum. I don't want it. I know, I don't want it. Try and at least fit it to your dog before you get on the ferry, because it's quite fun and quite embarrassing trying to drag your dog along while he's sort of rolling his nose down the deck. But also it just makes it a little bit easier for them if they've at least had a sniff of it, they've had it on for a few minutes. It's literally on them for less than 5 minutes. And I highly recommend you get a cage type, because obviously they need to breathe through it. If you've got one of the ones that just sort of wrap around their snout, they can't breathe properly, especially when they're stressed and anxious. They pant more, so just the cage is a lot better. You will also probably, if you're going to use public transport around Europe, probably need a muzzle for that as well. And again, the more that you can get them used to it before you have to get them on a bus or a train or whatever, the easier it is. We took Mac down to San Catera in Italy, and if you've never been, it's beautiful, and there's 5 really pretty little villages that you can reach by train. Dogs are very welcome on there, but they do need to be muzzled, so that was a time when he actually had the muzzle on the train. I think the longest was about 20 minutes, and obviously them trying to take it off every time can get quite wearing, so the more comfortable they are with it on for short times, the better. Taking food. How many people here feed their dog anything with meat product in? Good. Most of us. They don't care. They really don't care. Mac used to have wet food, and now he has dry food that has got chicken or beef or duck or whatever flavour. I've got salmon at the moment. He's a posh boy. Whatever flavour I happen to pick up. I have never heard of somebody checking the van for dog food, unless you're there with 17 crates of the stuff, and it's obvious that you're trying to sell it or do something. Taking it for your own personal use, they really will not care. If you feed your dog raw, there's plenty of supermarkets across Europe where you can buy raw stuff or fresh meat if you want to do that. I wouldn't take fresh stuff or raw stuff across, but dried dog kibble, they're really not going to bother. They're not interested at all. Oh, quick tip for you, actually, while we're talking about food. If you go to some of the bigger supermarkets, certainly in France, they've got Carrefour, but there's also a range of places called Bric-a-Marché, which is basically like a B&Q. They tend to have a huge pet section. So if you need a new dog bed, if you've got a dog that dragged the bed out, put it under the muddy van, and then decided to roll around in it, that sort of thing. Not that I would know anything about that. But if you decide that you need a new dog bed for that reason, a new towel, a new lead, all of that kind of stuff, you can get them generally from either the supermarket or from these Bric-a-Marchés. Also, vets tend to have quite a decent supply of stuff in them. So if you need specialist food or anything like that, a vet's always a good bet while you're touring. So a couple of things that just make life a little bit easier with a dog. I mentioned the muzzle, so I won't go through that again. But I highly recommend you take at least 2 leads. Anybody here have a dog that likes getting wet and muddy and things? Yeah. And then the lead gets all wet and muddy as well, and then you've got to sort of try and dry that. So having a second lead does help with that. Having a proper harness for them, I always recommend that a dog is harnessed anyway while you're travelling when they're clipped in. That purely then, if you have to break or anything, you haven't yanked their neck, it's all on their harness. So getting one of them is useful, but also when you're walking around, it's not pulling on their neck constantly whilst you're walking around. Make sure they have got a tag. They need a tag with identification on it. I always put my surname on it, and I always put my phone number with a +44. If you don't have the +44 and they happen to go missing, touch wood, that doesn't happen, but nobody who finds them will know it's a British number that they need to ring. So make sure it's got the +44 on there as well. Paperwork. Their paperwork is their passport, so make sure you keep it with you, carry it with you. If you're going out and about on public transport with them, I highly recommend you take their paperwork with them as well, but just keep it safe with you. Leaving in a vehicle. This is a question I get asked all of the time. And whilst I would love to say, no, I never leave my dog in the van unattended, right this very second he is in my motorhome unattended. So that would be a bit hypocritical. I will tell you what I do and don't do. So the last time I was here, in fact last year, it was baking hot. Anybody here last year? Yeah, really, really warm. Did you see Mac in here with me? Yes. I wouldn't leave him if it was sort of really, really warm. Obviously in this weather, it's not a problem at all. And if you go and look in my van, he is so chilled out in the van, he'll be fast asleep on the driver's seat waiting for me to come back again. So for a short hour or two, I'm not worried about it. I wouldn't leave him for 8 hours in the van. So I never leave him when it's hot, and I also never leave him when it's really, really cold, just in case the heating breaks or anything like that. You are always going to leave them for 10 minutes or so whilst you pop into a garage or you pop into a supermarket or something like that. So I wouldn't be too worried about leaving them for short periods of time. If you have a particularly anxious dog, which actually leads on quite nicely to the next point. So after we did lockdown, obviously Mac by this point had been travelling for, God, when was lockdown? He'd been travelling for 2 or 3 years in the van. He was happy as Larry, not a problem at all. And then we didn't move anywhere for about a year and a bit. And when we came back to go travelling again, he was really anxious, really unhappy. He'd obviously got himself quite settled and didn't quite know what was going on. So a couple of things that I did, and if you've got a dog who's either new to motorhoming or is quite anxious anyway, this might really help you. So first thing I did was some really, really short trips. We're talking 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes I even drove around the block to the local park, but I just went the long way round so that he got a bit of a drive. And at the end of every single one of them, it ended in something fun. So the beach, a park, a pond. I've got a spaniel, you know, those are his favourite things. If you've got a food-orientated dog, give them a treat or something at the end, just so that he associated going in the van with fun. I did that for a week or two. It wasn't very long, but just long enough to get him, oh, actually, this is quite good fun. And the other thing I did, which worked brilliantly, was I got him a calming collar, and this was on the recommendation of a vet. And I got it from Amazon. Other retailers are available. But it was this brilliant, it's literally called a calming collar, and it was lavender scented, and it smelled divine. It calmed me down. It was brilliant. And what I would do is I'd put it on him, and it's not like a magic switch, because I was really, I didn't want, because if we went back and forth from the UK to Europe so often, he was having loads of tapeworms, loads of jabs. I didn't want to put anything else into him. So just put the collar on him, and within about 10 to 15 minutes, he just, it wasn't like a switch, but he just calmed himself down. And eventually, over a week or two, he learnt that that smell meant we were driving. And then I'd take it off him when we were done for the day. And he was like, oh, we're done. That was all right. It was brilliant. Now he hasn't got a problem at all. He'll sort of jump around and leap all over the place. And he's like, yeah, we're going on a trip. But that really helped him. So that might help your dogs as well. Insurance, really quick but important point. If you have got pet insurance and you put it into that multi-policy checker and it came out with the cheapest option, you went, yes, I'll have that, thank you very much. The reason, or one of the ways that they make these policies cheaper is they take things out like coverage for Europe. So just check that your policy does actually cover your pet to be in Europe. Now, Europeans do not actually insure their pets very often. They just don't. So it's not a legal requirement to have insurance, but we are so used to having it that if you have got it, it's worth making sure that you're covered in Europe as well. A couple of things that I use, when I'm going abroad, especially when we're going down to warmer places like the south of France, Spain, places like that. Obviously, Mac isn't used to those sorts of temperatures. So a couple of things that I have tried. First thing I've tried actually is a cooling jacket. So that's the one there on the right-hand side. This is brilliant. You just wet it. Some of them you have to keep in your fridge. These are all by a company called Pordor, who I think I've got a discount code, actually, which I think you might find on the checklist. But they're fantastic, really high-quality stuff. They even survive spaniels. But the cooling jacket, you can just wet it, put it on him, and he just cools him down for hours. Really, really useful. I did have for a while a cooling mat, which is one of those blue ones that you just lay out, and it's supposed to cool them down when they lay on it. But something about the texture he didn't like, so I ended up sitting on it to encourage him to sit on it, but he sat on my lap, and I got a lovely cool bottom. So it wasn't quite the same thing. It wasn't quite work how it was supposed to. The other thing I've got, which I highly recommend, especially if you've got a dog that likes muck, is one of these zip-up bags, and these things are brilliant. You literally put them in, it goes up the back like a bag, so he's in like a sack, basically, and then you can rub them all around, all the sand comes off, a lot of the mud comes off, and he comes out like a little fluff ball. It's quite funny, but it does help keep your van just a little bit tidier. So how do we secure them whilst travelling? Well, a lot of this is going to depend on the size of your dog. So when we first got Mac and he was a little puppy, we had a fabric crate that was wedged between the driver and the passenger seat. And he did that for the majority of his trips. That's how he spent most of his trips. He was absolutely happy as Larry until one memorable day where we were driving up a mountain, I think it was in the Alps, and he managed to claw his way out of the fabric crate through this window right here. And then he popped up and went, "Hi, Mum and Dad, this is fun. What are we doing?" And we're going down these hairpin bends. I'm trying to grab the spaniel puppy who decided to go under the driver's seat. It was not good, not good. So highly recommend when they get to the point that they figure that out. I hadn't realised he'd been slowly making a little hole and then just one day just went through it. I thought, right, brilliant. So don't do that. So what we did now, the next thing that we did was we moved the fabric crate back a bit, got another one, but he got a little bit too big for that. So then he just used it like a bed. So the next thing that we did was upgrade to a metal crate. Anybody here got a metal crate in their van? Have you got any skin left on your shins? Yeah, it doesn't work particularly well. That lasted about 2 weeks. It was not fun. So I don't recommend you do that unless you have an enormous van and you've got space to do it. So now what we do is we use harnesses. And he doesn't really have a bed as such anymore. He sleeps mainly on my pillow. But if it's just me and him, he tends to stay in the passenger seat. So I have a harness on him, like I said. I've also then have 2 of these clips. So one clips round the armrest and is clipped to the back, which means that he can sort of sit up and do whatever he wants to do. And then I have one that goes round the headrest, which allows him to do this turn, 7 billion turn, until they sit in the same place that they were when they very first started. But he enjoys that, so both of them, and they stop him then. If I did have to brake really hard for any reason, it would stop him flying off and hitting the dashboard. So I've got 2 on him. On the back, I just tend to have the one because he likes to sit up and then lie down again, but the window is, you can see it there, it's just in front of him. And I just have one that plugs into the seatbelt, so it goes from the back of his harness into a seatbelt. I got both of those from Amazon, really quite cheap. And I've got a spare one of the seatbelt one just in case it breaks or anything happens to it. But that's how he tends to travel now. That's just because it's normally me and him, or me and another person and him, so he tends to go in the back for that one. If you do have a drop-down bed, so above where he sits in the back is a drop-down bed, it rattles like Billy-O, and he was really scared of that. So we ended up putting ratchet straps on to stop it rattling. So if you're not sure how noisy it is, or if they're a bit anxious, it could be because of that sort of moving above them. It might make them really quite unhappy. Anybody have a dog who likes water? Or mud? Or sand, or sort of rolling in things that they really, really shouldn't. Yeah, or this is Lake Bled in Slovenia, really famous beauty spot. People come for miles. How do you deal with that when you're in a motorhome and you don't have a bath? I have to say, campsites are getting a little bit better. I've been on some fabulous ones that have got sort of dog baths. Some of them have even got heated water for the dog bath. It's brilliant. So a couple of things that I highly recommend that you have in your van. First one is, like I say, a dog towel. I've got a dog towel and I've got that zippy bag up, depending on exactly how disgusting and dirty he is. And we've made it a bit of a game now. So we come back from a walk, we sit on the doorstep, even in weather like this, and I dry him all off. We look at what's going on, and then he gets a little treat, and that's sort of the end of the walk for him. And that works quite well. He knows not to jump in and jump all over the bed until we've done that. Second thing I recommend you get is a dog shower. Now, if you've got an outdoor shower in your van, amazing. Those things are like gold dust. If you don't, I've got a little portable one called a Mud Daddy. Got it from Amazon, but again, there are loads of different types on there that you can get. Top tip for this, fill the Mud Daddy with water before you go on the walk. Otherwise you come back, you've got your disgustingly filthy spaniel, you're trying to not let him in the van whilst opening the door, securing him outside, then you've got to go in and fill up the shower, by which point he's jumped on side going, what's going on? So I highly recommend if you fill it beforehand, you can leave it either under the van or just inside so you can grab it easily. It'll make your life so much easier. And the thing I like with the Mud Daddy is you can actually fill it with lukewarm water water. How is it that they can swim in this and they're quite happy, but oh my goodness, the shower is far too cold and they couldn't possibly deal with that. So you can put a bit of lukewarm water in there as well. Highly recommend you get a 12-volt Hoover as well. Just helps picking up the dog hair, although sadly when they're long and red, I can't blame it on the dog. But having a 12-volt Hoover just helps pick up sand, mud, stones, whatever other stuff that they bring in. And then I recommend you get a cover for your bed. Can everybody see that drool stain on my pillow? If you don't have a cover for your bed, this will happen, and you end up going to bed with sort of dog slobber all down your cheek. I just have a spare sheet, a spare rug, whatever you want, put it over there. It also means when they do come back from a walk, and if they've got slightly wetter paws than you thought and they've jumped on your bed, it's not quite as catastrophic. I have not, as yet, found a solution for the zoomies. If you follow me on Instagram or YouTube, you'll see this quite a lot, because all I tend to do is laugh and film him. But this goes on for everybody else that have dogs that do this. Yes, it goes on forever and ever. So just to bring this talk full circle, when we're coming back into Great Britain, like I said, so when you've been to France or any of the other countries, or indeed from Ireland, not from Ireland, you need to get a tapeworm issued. And this has to be issued by a proper vet, and then your animal health certificate has to be stamped and dated by the vet. So it sounds really intimidating to contact a vet in a foreign language and go, oh, I need this thing. I tend to, if it's France, I tend to sort of muddle through it. My French is passable. Any other country, to be fair, Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden, I hope, most of them speak impeccable English, so you'll probably be absolutely fine. And I literally Google vet on my thing, find one either around where I am, or I find one where I'm going to be. So just on my Google Maps on my phone, I just look for vet and see what's around. And then I'll phone one up and say, I need a tapeworm for my dog to go back to Great Britain. Can you help? And they'll generally say, yes, when do you need it? Today would be lovely, thanks, because I haven't planned it in advance. Often they can either fit you in that day or they'll fit you in the next day. It takes 5 minutes. They shove a tablet down your dog's throat and they sign the form. It's really, really straightforward. Like I say, if you're going to Ireland, you've already done the tapeworm when you went over there, so as long as you haven't gone via France or anything like that, you don't need one on the way back. It's really straightforward. And breathe. So, like I said, a lot of information thrown at you. If you've got a QR code or a photo, you know how to use QR codes, you can get them. I've left the 2 things out here. Just scan that and it will come up with a checklist for you. Or there's also some leaflets down here which have got the code on or the link on if you want to take that home, and you can type it into your computer or your phone when you get there. Michael is standing guard. Does anybody have any questions?
2 years ago, when I was actually at Mallorca, I took the dog with me. We actually flew from Brussels.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, we're not allowed to take dogs on a plane in the UK. When I was over there, having an apartment, I said to the vet, how much I was being ripped off in this country. I think this time I've actually paid £215 for the animal health certificate, which I'm going on Monday. Last time he charged me €15 for a Spanish pet passport. Mm-hmm. And he said, UK vets are all millionaires over there. So I'm just thinking when I'm out there in the next week, which I'm going to, whether he'll actually be able to still say, oh, yes, I'll get you another Spanish pet passport for a UK dog.
So it sounds amazing. And I know a lot of people who have done it, and it's fine. The problem you've got to remember is that to be legal, the dog has to become... So Mac has got a French pet passport because we got stuck out there throughout lockdown. So we were there for that long. He ended up getting a French pet passport. But to be legal, he had to become a French dog, which meant the UK insurance was no longer valid. Now, some people don't do it. Some countries worry about it less than the French do. And some people don't realise that actually their insurance will no longer be valid because technically their dog is a French, Spanish, whatever dog. That's the big drawback. So if you want the insurance to be 100% valid, you can't get a pet passport for another country.
Yeah, and in actual fact, can I ask you, have you ever tried flying with a dog?
No.
You haven't? Because, I mean, that size of dog, I was able to fly with Tui, €50 each way from Brussels down to Palma, and she came in the cabin with me.
Oh, magic.
The small dogs that they're great with, and the only time she had to go in the pet carrier was actually on the plane. Walking around Brussels, no problem. Walking around Palma, no problem.
Good.
In actual fact, this time we're going Corsica ferries, and I think I said about dog, there's charge for it, but they don't actually have any They just charge something for the cabin and that, but I don't think they've actually got any dedicated areas and that. So, come from south of France over there this time. Thanks.
Oh, well, have a good trip.
Hi. Have you got any good UK-based dog destinations for us? What were our Mac's favourite places for going?
That's a brilliant
Our dog
question.
particularly loves beaches.
Yes, so does Mac, funnily enough. So my parents are based down in Devon, so North Devon particularly. And to be fair, any of the beaches down there. There's also a fantastic one that I've been to a few times called Breen Sands, which is slightly further up. The water's 1 billion miles away, but the beach is fantastic. But Mac loves anywhere that's away from people so we can run. So Scotland and Ireland he both loved. The problem you've got to be really, he wouldn't know what to do with a sheep if it sort of jumped out at him. If you've got a dog that would, you've got to be really careful now because they have prosecuted dog owners for attacking or even worrying cattle. So just be really careful with that. But pretty much, to be fair, he likes anything. Anything where he can go in the water. One of his favourite beaches near us is Leon Solent, down on the south coast. He loves that. But you could go around the whole coastline with Mac and he'd be happy as Larry. I saw a couple of other hands. There we go.
Do you go cycling with Mac? And if so, what sort of cycle carrier have you got?
I don't. I go motorcycling with Mac. He goes on the back of the bike, so we just have a rucksack.
Okay.
It's a little doggy rucksack. It was a proper one that's got reinforced straps and things, and you sort of put his little legs in, put his little paws out. He sits there and goes on the back of the motorbike.
Any thoughts on cycle carriers?
It depends on the size of your dog.
Cockapoo.
I mean, if you don't want a rucksack, you can get these ones that you they're like, the ones that you pull, but you can get the ones that sit on the back, like a child seat. But it would depend on the weight.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No worries. I think it's up to 15 kilos. Yeah, so he sneaks in. He's about 13 and a half, 14. So, yeah, he just sneaks in. Oh. Anybody else got a question? If you don't want to... Oh, gentleman over there. Go on, then. Yeah. Yeah, so there's space on there for them to do that, and then you'll need another one. I'll need another one when you come back to the UK again. Yes. I think you can get, there's space for several of them. So, yeah, but you just need to... Now, if you went straight, it's unlikely to ever happen, but if you went from, say, Sweden to Norway to the UK within 5 days, you'd only need one. But it's very unlikely for that to happen. So, like for me, I'm going to have to go one from Sweden to Norway and then one from, I think I'm coming back via Holland. I've not really planned the trip yet. It's next week. We'll worry about it then. But the one when I'm coming back into Great Britain. All right? No worries.
Anything else?
Cool.
No, I've got one for you.
Oh, go on then.
When you are in Europe with Max,
Yeah.
do you walk him off a lead? Or
That's a
when you're in a
really
forest?
good
'Cause
question.
when I went, I was worried there's more dangerous animals out there than there are in England.
So it's less worrying about dangerous animals. France actually have just passed a law that your dog has got to be on a lead, except in specific places. Brilliant question. I forgot to talk about that. So yeah, I have done. And if I was on a beach that allowed dogs in France, then I would probably throw a ball for him into the sea. He'd be off a lead then. But generally when they're walking, they need to be on a lead. One place, actually talking about places, who was it who asked? Places that he loves is the Dolomites up in Italy, big mountain range. So I think if you're far, far, far away from people, you're fine. But again, you've got animals and stuff there that make it interesting. Wolves, I don't know what he'd do if he found a wolf. He's scared of badgers.
Anyone else got anything else?
Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Hello.
I just wanted to check the 90-day rule doesn't come in for going to Ireland,
Nope.
but does the same rule apply with your animal health certificate that
Do you know what?
you have to renew it?
It's a fantastic question, and the answer is DERA, who are the Irish people in charge, they're not sure. Which is really, really helpful, isn't it? My gut feeling, and I have no actual knowledge to back this up in, is that it wouldn't, but you still have to get the tapeworm. The nice thing was when you go to Ireland, you've got to take the tapeworm before you go. They don't check your paperwork on the way back. So I think for that reason alone, it wouldn't matter. They do check it when you come in. But I would hate to say, go do it, you'll be absolutely fine, and then get you into trouble. So the only thing I think you could do is send an email to DERA and say, I'm doing this, what do I need to do? But I think they were waiting for our pet passport system to come in again, and that hasn't, so they've sort of not made up a thing. But I don't know many people it has applied to, because most people wouldn't stay that long over there. If you find out, let me know. Yeah, cool.
We,
Oh, gone.
we're done.
Yes. Yep. So, yeah, well, most pet insurances will add, for more money, will add a Europe cover onto it for you. But just they're not always covered as inclusive. Okay. Oh.
Okay, probably call it there. And you're back on tomorrow
I am back on tomorrow.
with Tash.
12:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solo female camping talk.
But I will hang out over there if you guys want to come. I've got books for sale. I've got leaflets you can give away and some stickers. But if you've got any questions, by all means, come and chat and ask me there.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool.